911, what is your emergency? The call came in just after sunrise, a man's voice, shaky and breathless, echoing through the line. She's not breathing. I think she shot herself, he cried, his words tumbling over one another. The dispatcher tried to steady him. Sir, where are you calling from? 23 Maple Street. Please hurry, there's blood everywhere. I don't know what to do. You could feel the panic in his voice, the desperation. But was it real? Or was this a man struggling to mask something far darker? Haley Sutton was just 28 years old. Newly married, full of dreams, and loved by her friends and family. Yet here she was, lifeless, sprawled across the bedroom floor of the home she shared with her husband, Marcus. A single moment had turned their fairy tale romance into a tragedy. But wait, let's hit pause right there. Haley wasn't shot just once. No, there were 2 gunshots. Now, I don't know about you, but something about that doesn't sit right. 1 gunshot? Maybe. But 2? How does that even happen in a so-called accident? As detectives arrived, they quickly realized this wasn't just a tragic mistake. It was the beginning of an investigation that would unravel lies, betrayal, and secrets that no one saw coming. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? I'd love to know, so drop your location in the comments below. And if you enjoy gripping stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., we're bringing you another unforgettable tale that will leave you speechless. Your support helps us share these powerful stories with the world. Now, back to Marcus and Haley Sutton. As we uncover what really happened that morning, I want you to ask yourself, was Marcus truly the grieving husband he appeared to be? Or was there a far more sinister truth lurking behind his tears? Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end to find out. Let's begin. Marcus and Haley Sutton seemed like the perfect couple. They lived in Austin, Texas, in a cozy little house on a quiet street. Marcus was a real estate agent, one of the best in the area. People said he could sell a house faster than anyone else in town. He was confident, charming, and always seemed to know just what to say. Haley, on the other hand, had a completely different kind of magic. She was a nurse who loved her job and the people she helped. Her friends and patients adored her. They would say she had this way of lighting up a room with just her smile. Haley was bubbly, kind, and full of energy. She had dreams of traveling the world and starting a family. From the outside, it looked like Marcus and Haley had everything going for them. They had just gotten married a few months earlier in a beautiful ceremony. Friends said they looked so happy that day, so in love. Marcus would hold her hand and look at her like she was his whole world. Haley would laugh at his jokes and lean her head on his shoulder. They were the couple everyone wanted to be. But here's the thing. Not everything is as perfect as it seems. Behind closed doors, cracks were starting to show. Friends whispered about money problems. Marcus's real estate business wasn't doing as well as it used to, and Haley's nursing job wasn't enough to cover all the bills. Tension grew between them, but they tried to keep it hidden. Then there was Haley's online activity. She loved connecting with people online, posting pictures and chatting with friends. But Marcus didn't like it. He would get upset when she spent too much time on her phone or when she laughed at a message someone sent her. They argued about it often, and Marcus would say things like, "Why do you need all that attention? Am I not enough for you?" Haley insisted it was harmless, just her way of staying in touch with people, but the fights didn't stop. Over time, those little cracks started to grow bigger. So, what really happened between them? How did a couple who seemed so happy on the outside end up here with Haley lying lifeless on their bedroom floor? Was it just another argument that went too far? Or was there something much more sinister going on? It was a quiet morning in Austin, Texas. The sun had just started to peek through the blinds of the Suttons' home. Everything seemed calm. But then, out of nowhere, the sound of a gunshot shattered the silence. Marcus Sutton told the police he was in the kitchen fixing a leaky sink when it happened. He said he heard the loud bang and thought maybe something heavy had fallen, but before he could even react, there was another gunshot. He ran toward the bedroom, heart pounding, and that's when he saw her. Haley was on the floor of their bedroom, motionless. There was blood soaking through her shirt. A 9mm pistol was lying on the carpet, just inches away from her hand. Marcus said he froze. He didn't know what to do. He called 911, his voice shaking as he begged for help. But when the first responders arrived, something about the scene didn't sit right with them. For one, Marcus didn't look like someone who had been fixing a sink. His hands were clean, his clothes spotless. There wasn't even a single tool out in the kitchen. And then there was Haley. She had 2 gunshot wounds, one to her chest and another to her head. Investigators knew right away that this wasn't normal. People who take their own lives don't usually shoot themselves twice. The wounds didn't match what Marcus was saying. The position of the gun was strange, too. It was too far from Haley's hand to make sense if she had shot herself. The investigators couldn't ignore these details. Something was very wrong here. And they also noticed how Marcus was acting. He seemed upset, but it wasn't the kind of raw emotion they expected from a grieving husband. His answers were quick, almost rehearsed. And when they asked him to explain what happened, his story didn't make sense. Marcus said he loved Haley, that he didn't know why she would do this to herself. But as the detectives looked around the room, they couldn't help but feel like there was more to this story than Marcus was letting on. Why would a young woman with her whole life ahead of her suddenly decide to end it all? And if she didn't, then who did this to her? The answers wouldn't come right away, but the investigators knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a tragic accident. Something much darker had happened in that bedroom. And Marcus Sutton? He was hiding something. When the police sat Marcus Sutton down to ask what happened that morning, his story seemed simple at first. He told them Haley had been handling the gun in their bedroom and it went off by mistake. He said he didn't see it happen because he was in the kitchen fixing the sink. But here's the thing. Stories like this don't always stay simple. As the investigators started asking more questions, Marcus's story began to change. He said Haley had been acting strange lately, that she seemed upset about something. Then out of nowhere he hinted that maybe she had done it on purpose. He said, she was under a lot of stress, maybe she couldn't take it anymore. He even brought up their argument the night before, the one about Haley chatting with people online. She said she was sorry, Marcus told them. But I think it really got to her. I didn't mean for things to get so heated. But here's the problem with Marcus's story. The evidence didn't match. First, there was the gun. It was lying too far away from Haley's hand. If she had shot herself, it should have been right next to her, but it wasn't. The way the gun was positioned made it clear. Someone had moved it. And then there was the gunpowder residue. Or more accurately, the lack of it. When someone fires a gun, tiny particles of gunpowder get on their hands. It's one of those things that's nearly impossible to avoid. But Haley's hands were clean. There wasn't a trace of residue on her skin. The investigators knew this was a big deal. If Haley didn't have gunpowder on her hands, how could she have fired the gun? As they pressed Marcus for more answers, he started to get defensive. I told you what happened, he snapped. I don't know why you're trying to twist my words. But the detectives weren't twisting anything. They were following the evidence, and every piece of it was pointing in a different direction. A direction Marcus didn't want them to go. The more he talked, the more his story unraveled. He couldn't explain why Haley didn't have gunpowder on her hands. He couldn't explain why the gun was out of place. And when the detectives asked him to walk them through what happened one more time, his version of events didn't line up with what they saw in the bedroom. Something wasn't adding up. The story Marcus was telling didn't match the reality of what happened, and as the investigators kept digging, they realized the truth was far darker than anything Marcus was willing to admit. As the investigators dug deeper, they started to uncover the cracks in Marcus and Haley's marriage. From the outside, they looked like a happy couple, but on the inside, it was a much different story. The turning point came when they went through Haley's phone. What they found shocked them. Haley had been chatting with someone on social media, another man. The conversations weren't just friendly. There was flirting, compliments, and messages that hinted at something more. Haley had even confessed to Marcus about it. She told him she had made a mistake, that it was harmless and she was sorry. But for Marcus, it wasn't something he could let go of. The night before Haley died, Marcus confronted her. They had a huge argument and things got heated fast. Marcus couldn't believe she would do something like that, even if it was just online. "Why would you humiliate me like this?" he yelled. Haley tried to calm him down, but Marcus wouldn't listen. Haley's friends later told detectives that she had been thinking about leaving Marcus for months. She felt trapped. Marcus was controlling, always questioning her, always checking her phone and getting upset if she spent too much time talking to others. Haley felt like she couldn't breathe in the marriage anymore. One of her closest friends even said, Haley told me she didn't feel safe. She was scared of how Marcus would react if she ever tried to leave. For Marcus, this wasn't just about Haley chatting online. It was about control. Haley had started to pull away, and Marcus felt like he was losing her. The investigators believed this was the real motive behind what happened. The flirtation online was just a spark that lit a fire already fueled by jealousy, control, and fear of losing everything. But what really pushed Marcus over the edge? Was it Haley's confession, her plans to leave, or something else entirely? As we piece together the events leading up to that fateful morning, one thing is clear. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a crime born from control and desperation. As investigators continued their work, they made a discovery that changed everything. Marcus and Haley had security cameras in their home, and although most were turned off, one camera in the living room had been recording just days before Haley's death. What they found was heartbreaking. In one clip, Marcus can be seen pacing back and forth, yelling at Haley, who's sitting on the couch, her head in her hands. His voice is cold, filled with anger and frustration. "You think I don't know what you've been doing online," he snaps at her. Haley barely responds. You can see the sadness in her posture, the way her shoulders are slumped. Another recording captured audio of Marcus berating her. "You've embarrassed me. You've made me look like a fool," he says. "Do you even care what you've done to us?" Haley tries to explain, but Marcus cuts her off. These videos painted a clear picture of a relationship unraveling, with Marcus growing angrier and more controlling. It was obvious that the online flirtation wasn't just a small issue to him, it was something he couldn't let go. But what stood out most was how Marcus acted after Haley's death. Instead of rushing to help her or calling 911 immediately, Marcus did something investigators found deeply suspicious. He hid his phone. Yes, you heard that right. Before dialing for help, Marcus stashed his phone where it couldn't be seen. Why? What was he trying to hide? Not only that, but Marcus didn't even call 911 first. His phone records showed he made 2 other calls, one to his lawyer and another to a family member, before reporting Haley's death. And then there was his behavior with the first responders. He didn't seem panicked or desperate. Sure, he was upset, but not the way you'd expect from a husband who just lost his wife. He didn't cry uncontrollably. He didn't try to hold Haley or save her life. He just stood there, explaining over and over that it was an accident. When paramedics asked if he had tried to stop the bleeding, Marcus said no. He claimed he was too wet to help her, even though there wasn't a single sign he'd been working on a sink like he said. The more investigators looked at Marcus's actions, the less they believed his story. His behavior wasn't just odd, it was calculated. What was Marcus hiding? Why was he so calm after such a devastating event? And why did he seem more focused on explaining himself than grieving for his wife? These were the questions detectives needed answers to, and as they dug deeper, the truth about Marcus Sutton would leave everyone speechless. Let's keep going, there's so much more to uncover. When the autopsy report came back, it raised even more questions than answers. Haley Sutton's injuries told a story, one that didn't match Marcus's version of events. The medical examiner confirmed that Haley had been shot twice, once in the chest, with the bullet entering at an angle that suggested it was fired from several feet away. The second shot was to her head, up close. Now, let's think about that for a second. How could someone accidentally shoot themselves twice, and why would the shots be at such different distances? This was the first clue that something about Marcus's story wasn't adding up. But that wasn't all. Haley's body also showed signs of a struggle. There were bruises on her wrists and arms, the kind you'd get if someone grabbed you and tried to hold you down. It was clear that Haley had fought back against something, or someone, before she died. Then there was the ballistics evidence. Investigators found that the gun had been fired twice in rapid succession. The examiner explained that this wasn't normal for an accident. Guns don't just go off like that, one shot right after the other. Someone had to pull the trigger. Twice. The bruises, the distance of the shots, the way the gun was fired. It all painted a picture of a violent confrontation, not an accident. Haley's death wasn't the result of carelessness or a tragic mistake. It was something much more deliberate. The autopsy also revealed another heartbreaking detail. Haley's injuries showed she had been alive for several minutes after the first gunshot. If someone had helped her right away, she might have survived. But Marcus, the man who claimed to love her, didn't do anything. Instead, he stood by and let her die. For the investigators, this was one of the hardest parts to accept. Marcus didn't just fail to save Haley. He might have been the one who caused her death in the first place. The evidence was clear. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't self-inflicted. It was something much darker. So, what really happened in that bedroom? And why would Marcus, who once promised to love and protect Haley, turn on her in such a violent way? When detectives brought Marcus Sutton into the interrogation room, they were ready to dig deeper into his story. They had already spotted so many inconsistencies in what he told them, and now they wanted answers. Marcus walked in looking nervous but still trying to keep his composure. At first, the detectives kept the tone light. They asked him simple questions, giving him a chance to explain what happened that morning. Marcus stuck to his original story. He was in the kitchen fixing the sink when he heard the gunshots. He ran into the bedroom and found Haley on the floor with a gun nearby. "I was in shock," he said. "I didn't know what to do." But as the detectives gently pressed him for more details, cracks began to show. They started pointing out things that didn't make sense. "You said you were working on the sink," one detective began, "but your clothes were spotless. There weren't any tools out. Can you explain that?" Marcus shifted in his chair, his eyes darting around the room. I must have cleaned up before I called 911, he stammered. But the detectives weren't buying it. Then they brought up the autopsy. "Haley had 2 gunshot wounds," the lead detective said. "One from a distance and one up close. How does that happen in an accident?" Marcus's face turned red. He leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "I don't know," he muttered. "I wasn't there when it happened," but the detectives didn't let up. "And what about the bruises on her wrists?" they asked. "Those don't just appear out of nowhere. Did you grab her, Marcus?" That's when his tone changed. Marcus went from nervous to defensive. "I told you what happened," he snapped. "She was upset. She must have grabbed the gun herself." The detectives didn't raise their voices. They stayed calm, leaning into the evidence instead. "Marcus," one of them said, "we know Haley didn't fire that gun. There was no gunpowder residue on her hands, and the position of the gun, it doesn't add up. If you know something more, now is the time to tell us." For a moment, Marcus just sat there, silent. Then he blurted out, "I didn't mean for it to happen. She just pushed me too far." The room went still. The detectives exchanged glances, letting his words sink in. "What do you mean, Marcus?" one of them asked softly. "What happened that made you feel pushed?" Marcus's hands were shaking now. "She wouldn't stop," he said. "With the online stuff, the flirting, the way she kept embarrassing me. I lost it, okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far." That moment was a turning point. Marcus had just admitted that his anger got the best of him. He wasn't sticking to the accident story anymore. He was trying to justify what he had done. But the detectives weren't about to let him off the hook. "Marcus," they said, "this wasn't just about Haley chatting online, was it? You were losing control of the relationship and you couldn't handle it." Marcus didn't respond. He just buried his face in his hands and mumbled, "It was all too much. I didn't know what else to do." By the end of the interrogation, Marcus's guilt was clear. The evidence, the inconsistencies, and now his own words had painted a picture of what really happened that morning. Marcus Sutton wasn't just a grieving husband. He was a man who let his anger and jealousy destroy everything. When Marcus Sutton's case finally went to trial, the courtroom was packed. Haley's friends, family, and even neighbors came to hear the truth about what happened that terrible morning. People wanted justice for Haley, a young woman whose life was cut short far too soon. The prosecutors wasted no time laying out their case. They started by painting a clear picture of Marcus's controlling behavior. They showed the jury the footage from the home security camera, where Marcus was seen yelling at Haley just days before her death. His words echoed in the courtroom, "You think I don't know what you've been doing online?" Then they brought up Haley's plans to leave. They shared text messages Haley had sent to her best friend, messages that revealed she was afraid of Marcus. One message read, "I don't know how much longer I can take this. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells every day." The prosecutors argued that Marcus couldn't handle losing control of Haley. They said he planned to confront her that morning and things turned violent. "This wasn't an accident," the lead prosecutor told the jury. "This was premeditation. Marcus Sutton knew exactly what he was doing." The defense, on the other hand, tried to tell a different story. They admitted that Marcus had a temper but argued that he wasn't a killer. They said that morning was just a terrible accident, that the argument between Marcus and Haley got out of hand. Their main argument was that Marcus never intended to hurt Haley. This was not murder, the defense attorney said. This was a tragic mistake made in the heat of the moment, but the evidence was too strong. The prosecutors reminded the jury of the autopsy results, how Haley had 2 gunshot wounds, one from a distance and one up close. They pointed out the bruises on her wrists, the lack of gunpowder residue on her hands, and the way Marcus moved the gun after the shooting. They also brought up Marcus's behavior after Haley died. Why had he called his lawyer before calling 911? Why had he hidden his phone? And why didn't he try to help Haley when she was still alive? The jury listened closely to both sides, but it didn't take them long to decide. After just a few hours of deliberation, they came back with a verdict. Marcus Sutton was guilty of second-degree murder. And the judge read the sentence, 25 years in prison. Haley's family let out a sigh of relief. It wasn't enough to bring Haley back, but it was justice. Marcus wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. As Marcus was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he didn't say a word. The confident man who once controlled everything was now facing the rest of his life behind bars. For Haley's family, the trial brought some closure, but the pain of losing her would never fully go away. Her mother spoke to reporters outside the courthouse, holding back tears as she said, "Haley was the kindest soul. She didn't deserve this. We just hope her story helps someone else who might be in a similar situation." This trial wasn't just about punishing Marcus, it was about remembering Haley and making sure her voice was heard. The story of Marcus and Haley Sutton is a heartbreaking reminder of how dangerous toxic control and unchecked emotions can become in a relationship. What started as love between 2 people turned into manipulation, fear, and eventually tragedy. Haley Sutton was more than just a victim. She was a person full of life and love, someone who made others feel better simply by being around her. Her patients adored her, her friends cherished her, and her family loved her deeply. Haley had dreams, plans, and a bright future ahead of her, but all of that was stolen because of one man's inability to control his anger and jealousy. As her mother said after the trial, Haley was full of life and love. She deserved so much more. Those words linger in the heart, don't they? This case also highlights the importance of recognizing the warning signs of a toxic relationship. If someone is controlling your actions, isolating you from loved ones, or making you feel unsafe, those are red flags that should never be ignored. No one should feel trapped or powerless in a relationship. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please don't stay silent. Reach out for help. There are people and organizations ready to support you and guide you to safety. You are not alone. Haley's story is a tragedy, but it's also a call to action. It's a reminder to stand up against abuse and speak out for those who can't. Her voice may have been silenced, but her story will continue to be told, bringing light to the darkness and hope to those who need it most. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like Haley's. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe and take care.